Greetings, Catherine Stickroth here. Welcome to our channel for a life worth living, where we are exploring PTSD recovery in such a way that we can be relieved of the debilitating symptoms such as intrusive memories, nightmares, anxiety, dissociation. I'm not a licensed healthcare provider or mental health care provider. I am someone who has been receiving those services for a lot of years. So what you'll find on this video is the application of what I've learned from the professionals and books I've read and videos I've watched as I've tried to understand this condition. It's a condition that results from what happened to us. It is not who we are. So I thought today we would go back to the actual phrase post-trauma stress disorder. Let's see if I got it right. Yep. Okay. Post-trauma stress disorder. There you go. Okay, so we're going to break it down word by word. So let's talk about post. What does that mean? Well, we have post-surgery, post-game celebration, post-election results. So the post and post-trauma stress disorder is what happens after an incident. So let's go to the word trauma. And I kept trying to think of how could you break that down? And so this is what I got. A temporary response after unexpected malevolent attack. A temporary response after unexpected malevolent attack. Okay, now for somebody who had been living with PTSD all her life, because childhood trauma started as an infant, and then I just kept recirculating the script in my life. I was 56 years old when I hit such a bottom with PTSD. I was lying in the bed in a domestic abuse shelter, staring at the ceiling, saying, I can't do this anymore. And what I meant by that was running from my PTSD. So when I started studying PTSD, like, what is this? Why, I've been told this for a lot of years, but what is it? And I came to realize that in a perfect world, first of all, there wouldn't be a traumatic event. So let's back that up. A healthy response to trauma is to provide immediate psychological care and processing so that the effects of the trauma do not remain. And I realized this. There was he was called the shoe bomber, or they were called the shoe bomber. I think it was two people in Boston. This was years ago. And that was the first time I noticed that they sent support mental health care providers directly to the scene, like immediately afterward, to process with the victims what had happened. I was like, well, that's interesting. And then I started noticing in natural disasters, like I went through Hurricane Katrina, and they had, in addition to the basic supplies like water and food that they were shipping in, they also provided mental health care providers. The Red Cross provides that with a fire, or they did back then. I haven't checked recently, but what I'm saying is the more immediate the opportunity to process what happened, it doesn't stick to you. Like all that goes with trauma will not stick to you, or it will have a little effect. But when you have repeated trauma over and over and over again for years, or even if it's one incident that, like if a child is ignored, if all the symptoms are there for trauma and the trauma is ignored, she's she or he has not had an opportunity to process it, then it sticks to you. So that's why I call it a temporary response, because I did not want to believe that PTSD was a chronic terminal condition. I just could not believe. I just made up that idea myself. Maybe it was my frustration, maybe it was my denial. It's like, do I have to live like this the rest of my life? And I just couldn't believe that I would have to do that. So that's what motivated my research and creative tools to work through my PTSD. So a temporary response after an unexpected malevolent attack. Now, malevolent means evil and bad. And a lot of us who have experienced religious abuse in the name of God have been blinded to the truth of evil. And that's something I had to spend time with, because I was calling myself a Christian. I was saying, yes, Jesus was my Savior, but I wasn't acknowledging evil. And when my memories started flooding back and I was losing my mind with those memories, and they were evil, I could no longer deny that. And so I spent time trying to understand evil while not crossing into it, for sure. I did not want to do that. And I rationalized to myself, I'm going to look at evil for a time to try to understand it, because I remember when my brothers played high school football, they would have to go to the football house with a coach and watch videos of the opposing team. I said, oh, okay, to learn their moves and how to counter them and how to win a game against the other teams. I said, okay, I'm going to pretend like I'm watching a movie of the opposing team as I study evil. I said, I don't know how anybody would want to be evil, but I guess it's true. So I looked at the word malevolent, and just there are evil people out there, and they want to hurt other people just for the pleasure of hurting them. I don't get it myself, but it's out there, and I was victimized by that, and I was attacked, and anyway, I was carrying all that, because when in each abusive situation, there wasn't anybody, like, supposedly, if a child is hurt, she can go to either parent and get the comfort and help that could normally be expected. That didn't work in my family, because it was my parents doing the abuse. And of course, one of the rules was don't tell. So there wasn't anybody. So these were unexpected, malevolent attacks upon me that left me with a lot of messages and a script upon my life that I was acting out, that I came to realize I didn't even write that script. So some choices on down the road with that. So we've just broken down post and trauma. Okay, now we're going to go to stress. So stress would be any kind of pressure. This is just a cute little marshmallow pillow, nothing to it. But anyway, stress would be like, this would be stress. I'm stressing the pillow. And then the way it responds would be resilience. And then pressing it, this kind of pressure, affects the surface of the pillow, and then the pillow bounces back. And so I said, there must be a bounce back factor in us. But it's not an easy bounce back thing. Like somebody will get hurt, and a kid will get hurt, and a grown-up yells, shake it off, walk it off, run it off, And not every injury can be dealt that way. And I also have a post-concussive syndrome. So I study concussions, and a concussion comes from a blow to the head, and PTSD is like a blow to a person, to their psyche, to their bodily functions, to their emotions. It's a blow, and resilience determines what the bounce back will be. And if we do not bounce back as quickly as others say, that is not a mark on our character. It's an indication of how serious the blow was. So I went to college to be an engineer, and my college classes were geared more toward project management and building design. And so one class was called Strength of Materials. And I cut this out years and years ago before I totally, well, actually before I was even diagnosed with PTSD. But I've kept it all these years. I'm going to read it, and then I'll type it in the space below the video. Okay, so I was studying physics, I was studying strength of materials and mechanics. It says when external forces act on a body, two things happen. First, internal forces that resist the effects of the external forces are set up in the body. We call that pushback, don't we? These internal forces produce stresses in the material of the body. Second, the external forces produce deformations or changes in the shape of the body. Strength of materials, or mechanics of materials, is the study of the properties of material bodies that enable them to resist the actions of external forces, of the stresses within bodies, and of the deformations that result from external forces. So, like I said, my college classes were about building buildings, and you have to determine the strength of the wood that would frame the house, that would hold the roof. You'd have, or steel beams, things like that, or trusses. And you had to know the strength so it could support the load. So I broke that down in this PTSD exploration. Like, okay, what were the strengths of my material? Like, what are the strengths inside of me? The problem for me, and I'm not saying my trauma was worse than anybody else's, and I would please ask anybody, do not compare your trauma to anybody else's. Trauma is trauma to each individual, and we have no place to judge that. But what I'm saying is, so much had happened over and over and over and over and over again. I just had no result, or maybe I should say I had very little resilience to what was coming next. So, and that's why my dissociation got worse, my anxiety got worse, my depression got worse. It's just everything kept getting worse and worse and worse. So anyway, we've broken down post-trauma stress disorder. For the D, the disorder, well, we can imagine that consistent stress like that, whether it's one incident or several, the pressure just scatters. It just scatters. Things break. Our ideas about how life should be are broken. Our ideas about family relations could be broken. Our ideas about whether school is safe or not could be broken, and everything becomes disordered. So, post-trauma stress disorder that comes from an external force, and then the PTSD is the internal force pushing back. And when we have recurring memories, we're pushing back, we're pushing back, we're pushing back, not to what happened today, but to the same incident rolling around our head. So in the next video, I'm going to show you a tool that I came up with that actually lessens anxiety. and helps me narrow down what is going on in my head. So stay tuned, and thank you again for coming to this channel for A Life Worth Living. And I hope that as you keep walking with us, that you too will find a life worth living.